At issue this Sunday, breathing new life into the state Republican Party. Amy Carnevale faces a tall task as the chair of the Massachusetts GOP, but she already has some early wins. She's joining us in studio.
And Governor Healey signed the first major tax reform in 2 decades into law. But is it having unintended consequences on the state budget? We're going to take a closer look. At Issue starts now.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to another edition of At Issue. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. We're focusing on Beacon Hill today, including the impact of last year's tax cuts on this year's budget and on your and my family.
Plus, State Republican Party Chairperson Amy Carnevale is going to join us in just a minute. But of course, we're going to start with a look back at what was at issue over the past week.
Now to a commercial controversy. It involves presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
A $7 million commercial from a super PAC supporting Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s independent presidential bid.
The House of Representatives voted to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
This was the second impeachment attempt by Republicans who claim Mayorkas failed to enforce immigration laws.
Voters in Milton voted not to comply with a state law that would require more housing in their units near T-stops. Former FBI agent is being charged with faking information in the Republican impeachment inquiry surrounding President Biden. Alexander Smirnoff is charged with making a false statement and creating a false and fictitious record.
A New York judge has found Donald Trump liable in his civil fraud trial here. The judge ordered him to pay an estimated $350 million.
The past year and a half have been particularly tough for Republicans in Massachusetts. There are no Republican statewide office holders, and only 28 of the 200 seats in the Mass state legislature are held by Republicans.
And the state party is hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and former party chair Jim Lyons has filed a number of lawsuits against the party and its current officials. But the party has a few wins under its belt lately, and joining us to talk about the party's plans, Amy Carnevale, the state Republican Party chair. Thanks so much for joining us, Amy. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so you had a victory last year. Peter Durant won a special election for a state Senate seat that had been held by Democrats for decades. What was the secret sauce there? What was the secret to his success? And is it something you can replicate across the state?
Yeah, so thanks very much. So we did have a victory with now State Senator Peter Durant. And it was having a strong candidate and really working as a team, as a Republican Party. The party and then State Rep Durant, when he ran for his seat, we really worked well together to present a unified message. And frankly, I think some of the issues that he talked about when he ran are really resonating with Massachusetts voters, such as immigration and affordability in Massachusetts. So I think it was the combination of having a good candidate and great issues.
Go ahead.
We can sometimes look at special elections and say, oh, that was just the special election. But do you see those issues translating into potentially further victories in Massachusetts?
We absolutely do. And in fact, the House seat that was held by Peter Durant, the Democrats did not even field a candidate in that race. So we had a primary just a little over a week ago in which we had 2 Republicans compete for that race. So we presume that that will then translate into November. And we're seeing, looking ahead to November, many strong Republican candidates coming forward to run for office. So we're really encouraged by the precedent that was set with Senator Durant.
So those are the recent victories, but you're also facing a lot of challenges. We're going to get to those in just a moment. I want to ask about this move of the party headquarters back to Boston from Woburn. Was that a symbolic move? Was it a financial move? Why do that? And in the long run, does it matter where the Mass GOP is headquartered in Massachusetts? For me, it was a symbolic move. I think in order to compete statewide, you need to send a message that you're in the state capital. Certainly, it's important to be throughout the state, and we'll be looking down the line to have some field offices outside of Boston. But it's important to be in our capital if we want to compete, if we want to talk with legislators, if we want to talk to the media and get our message out. So for me, it was absolutely symbolic to be back in the city. So we're excited to be back.
All right, let's look at future elections. Senator Elizabeth Warren, very unpopular among Republicans here in her state. She didn't win her presidential primary in the home state. So far, no Republicans have officially thrown their hat into the ring. We're getting close to the election. We have heard John Deaton's name being bandied about. What can you say about whether or not the Republican Party will have a candidate against Elizabeth Warren in the general election?
So I'm really happy to share with our viewers today that we will have a candidate. John Deaton has been in the news in this last week, and I expect that he'll make a decision in the coming number of days whether he'll be a candidate or not. He has an interesting background, and I think will present a strong candidacy if he decides to run against Senator Warren.
Why is he the candidate for this election, and why are we looking for someone who is out of state, who's moving to the state? Were there no other Republicans who were ready to take on Elizabeth Warren?
Well, certainly Elizabeth Warren has a war chest. It's a presidential election year, which tends to be a little bit more difficult for Republicans to run in Massachusetts. Frankly, he came to us and said, he has a passion for running for office, and he wants to compete and present his vision, and he thinks his background really will resonate with voters here. And he does have some background in Massachusetts, too. So it's not as if he's brand new to the state.
You've had the Republicans have had a number of victories with non-traditional candidates. You could say Charlie Baker was a non-traditional candidate as well. Is this the route? Do you think this is a route to victory for the
Well,
Republicans?
we'll see. It's certainly, he grew up in the streets of Detroit, and I would say in certainly very difficult circumstances. And so he's going to, if he does become a candidate, he'll present that vision to the voters in Massachusetts.
So we know the party has found itself in court a lot lately. Jim Lyons suing. Are these legal battles preventing you from really focusing on moving the state party forward? Is it having an impact on just your day-to-day ability to do the job for the party?
Yeah, so I would say in the early days, it was something that we had to get our handle around the number of lawsuits that had been filed, but we're dealing with them as they come. We were actually just in court yesterday on what I would describe was a frivolous case, and we felt that the judge gave us a good hearing, and we're hopeful that that case will be dismissed in the coming days. So we're moving forward. I would say it's not too much of a distraction, and for me, I want to be focused on the future, and so that's really what I'm looking at.
What are these suits about? You mentioned a frivolous case that was heard last week. What are you all being taken to court for?
So the former chairman, when he was chair of the party, was suing the party treasurer for interfering in the business of the committee. When I became chair, I put that for a vote of the committee. They voted not to continue it. We dismissed it. And he filed what's called a derivative lawsuit, which is basically for minority shareholders in a corporation to try to refile. It's frankly, it's a distraction. It's frivolous, and I'm confident that the judge should be dismissing it in the current days.
All right, let's look at the national menu for the Republicans. Former President Donald Trump obviously has a stranglehold over the national party. There's actually no doubt about that. That's a sort of fact right there. But here in Massachusetts, we had Governor Charlie Baker, one of the most popular governors in the United States. The two people couldn't be further apart when it comes to temperament, beliefs, political ideals, yet they were both Republicans. When you're looking at how the Massachusetts GOP should be, where are you? Are you on the Trump end of the dial or on the Charlie Baker end of the dial?
So for me as party chair in Massachusetts, I'm focused on candidates in state and the issues that resonate here in Massachusetts. So I talked about that a year ago, and that continues to be my focus, the issues here in Massachusetts and what resonates with our voters.
Good.
One of the challenges of being a Republican in Massachusetts is that some of the things that are in your party platform in the past, same-sex marriage, which has been widely accepted not only in Massachusetts but across the country. Safe access to legal abortion is another issue which Massachusetts feels compelled to make sure it's important to secure. So how do you do a roadmap for Republicans to win statewide when some of those issues are a little out of step with what the Massachusetts voters and the unaffiliated voters, who, of course, we know are the major contingency here in the state, how do you reach them?
That's right. So 62% of the voters in Massachusetts are unaffiliated, and we need candidates who can appeal to those voters. And I trust our candidates to talk about their policy positions, because ultimately those are the individuals who will get elected and who will vote on these critical issues. So really, I leave that up to our candidates to talk about the issues that they believe in.
A lot of talk has been made in terms of the general election matchup that we could potentially see, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, to elder statesman. I'll just say that. We hear on the Democratic side a lot of folks saying, you know, the bench is stocked. You've got some young up and coming Democrats who could be and move to that national stage. On the Republican side, and both nationally and maybe here in the state party, what does the future look like for the Mass GOP? Because at some point, it's got to get a little bit younger.
So I can appreciate that. So really, that's what we're working to build. You know, I'm a party chair who's a little bit younger than our predecessor, and I'm looking to attract more younger candidates to office. I have an initiative reaching out, along with several of my colleagues on the state committee, to college Republicans, because that's the future of our party. So I agree with you. We need to be attracting younger candidates to consider running for office, because you know, ultimately it's their future that's really at stake. So I'm working hard to try to incorporate that.
How do you reach those folks? Because we know, regardless of party, those folks are worried about the climate. They're worried about things like affordable housing and affordability itself. What are you seeing out there maybe from younger Republicans in the state that really get them motivated and get them engaged in the political process? You
know, some of those issues you talked about are really important to them. Affordability, as they think about coming out of college, paying those college loans, you know, holding down a job and just being able to afford to live in continue to live in Massachusetts. That's a big issue for them. We do hear that climate is an issue too, that they want to see that our candidates are in sync with them on those issues. But for me, it's going talking to them and just really welcoming them into the party, which is something that I don't think they too often hear from on the Republican side.
One of my favorite things about having folks like Corey move to Massachusetts and have this, some people have a vision of, oh, it's all Democrats at Beacon Hill. Things must get done quickly, and they all agree. And I always argue, well, because there aren't a lot of Republicans, there's not a lot of stick there, right? So there's a lot of nothing happening sometimes because there's no stick to make them do something. Is that a message that resonates when you're talking to people about running as Republicans? What are the obstacles when you approach a business person or an activist and say, have you considered running for office? Look at how things are on Beacon Hill. You can make a difference. What do they say to you?
Yeah, so absolutely. The idea that you need to have two-party government for democracy to succeed is critical. And we're lacking that on Beacon Hill right now, with all of our constitutional officers being Democrat, all of our federal delegation being Democrat, and supermajorities in the House and Senate. And you miss something in the process of democracy, having those checks and balances in the dialogue to achieve public policy. So that's the argument I'm making to candidates is, you know, they can, even though we're not in a position in the next even year or two to be a majority, that's going to take time. Even having more voices out there, calling attention to policy issues is helpful, as we've seen in some of the recent policy dialogue.
Knowing that they don't have the math on their side in the State House, we did see a moment during the supplemental budget where Republicans actually had some leverage, because it was just going to take one of them to kill the whole thing. It appeared they tried to use it to some extent, but ultimately it passed. How would you assess the job that the Republicans who are in the State House are doing and pushing their principles and some of their policies forward, and maybe finding ways to sort of massage it into some of the legislation that gets passed by the supermajority Democratic?
It's a good question. And the fact that budget was delayed by as much as it was drew attention to some of the underlying policy issues in the budget. So the fact that Republicans were able to use that technique, I think, called attention to the underlying policy. And since that's the party working with our legislative leaders, we have a much more cooperative relationship than we've had in the past. We have regular dialogue with our legislative leaders about what they're trying to achieve, what the party can do to highlight what they're working on. And I expect that relationship to continue to improve in the future.
All right. Massachusetts GOP Chair Amy Carnevale is going to be a busy year for us, but we know it's going to be a busy year for you, too. So thanks for taking the time and speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Up next, we are talking taxes, specifically the impact of the tax reform law that Governor Healey signed last year.
Two men who follow tax and budget policies closely give us their view of the impact those cuts have had and will have on the state economy and budget. Stay with us.
Welcome back to At Issue. There's a very, very old saying that there are only two guarantees in life: death and taxes. We're going to talk about the latter. The former is not as fun. So last year, Governor Maura Healey delivered the state's first tax cuts in nearly 20 years. But the celebrations were short-lived.
A few months later, the governor announced $375 million in cuts to the state's budget. Why? Well, because for several months, tax revenues have not met expectations. So today, we're asking whether those two things are related.
And here to help us answer that question are Doug Howgate, president of the nonpartisan Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation, and Phineas Baxendall, interim president of the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All right, here's my ongoing question that's been bugging me for a long time.
For months now.
Doug, and I bring it up all the time. Doug, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
Are the tax revenues down? Is the state bringing in more revenue, but it's falling short of the projections? Why do we keep making these projections and missing them? What's going on here?
Great question. So there's two things that people often talk about. There's tax collections compared to our benchmark, which is what we expect to hit, and then there's year-over-year tax growth. Right now, through January of 2024, we are short of our benchmark. We're also, for the first time this year, short of collections year over year. Now, one thing I will just mention in terms of kind of why do we keep missing those marks? During the pandemic, we actually saw state tax collections grow by 40%, right? This explosion in tax collections that no one really expected. And I think when that happened, there was a realization that we weren't going to keep all that money, that we were going to see a decline. The question was, how steep would that decline be and how long would it go on for? What we're seeing now is a bit of a stagnation in revenues that's gone on for longer than folks expected.
Why do the economists keep being surprised?
Well, I will say it's also so we collect about $40 billion in tax collections a year. So take fiscal year 2023, for example, we ended up with $39.2 billion in tax collections. The original estimate was 39.6. So like on a percentage basis, you're off by about 1%. The challenge is you tend to budget based on the full amount of tax collections. So it's not so much that the projections are often wrong by billions and billions of dollars, though we were when tax collections grew by so much. It's that when you miss the mark, it means that the budget that you put in place several months ago needs to be adjusted to account for that.
So even missing that mark by just a little bit can lead to having to make major cuts to your budget?
It can, depending. Although I would point out in the previous fiscal year 2023, no mid-year budget adjustments. We missed that mark by about $600 million. What I think the Healey administration saw this past January was we missed the mark for several months, and clearly the trend was a little different than what we expected. So I think it was also a bit of a proactive move, as in addition to just, gee, do we need to reduce the budget based on $10 or $20 million worth of a shortfall?
So, Phineas, I think for a lot of folks, it's easily to draw the connection. Oh, we're not collecting as much tax revenue because we just had these tax cuts that were made, and they point to things like the estate and short-term capital gain tax cuts benefiting the largely wealthier folks in Massachusetts, thus having to cut the budget, which impacts folks on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. Is it correct to draw that connection that we are down by so much because the governor cut taxes? Or is there another thing at play here?
Well, it depends on how long-term or short-term these trends are. You know, I think the legislature planned these tax cuts into the budget that they set, so it wasn't, in that sense, it's not a surprise that the tax cuts happened. I think looking in the longer term, if this is a longer-term trend, some of those estate tax for the wealthiest or other kinds of tax cuts might not look so good in the rearview mirror.
So are people having conversations now about whether or not we should repeal those tax cuts? Is that a conversation that starts at this moment? Has it already been going on? What's the appropriate time for that discussion?
I haven't heard those conversations, and I doubt you have either, Doug. No.
And I would just note, in terms of, just to strictly speaking answer your question, in terms of the tax reductions that were put into place, the shortfall we have this year is really unrelated to that. As Phineas mentioned, one, they were programmed into the budget, but also when those tax reductions actually go into effect, it really hasn't impacted collections to date. And the other thing I would just note is we saw a budget last year that grew by about 7% when it was signed. And they also set aside $600 million for tax relief. If they hadn't set aside that $600 million for tax relief, that would have been spent in the budget as well. So it's not always as straightforward as if we hadn't done this one thing, we would have those resources available. They likely would have been used in another way.
So then, to your point, at what point do you really then start to worry and say, okay, this is not just a short-term trend, this is a problem that is lasting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the governor's approach to this is really quite smart. What she said is we have the biggest rainy day fund we've ever had. It's bigger than any but the largest state. California and Texas are the only states with rainy day funds larger than ours, where we expect, all the economists at least are telling us that we can expect growth to start to pick up later in FY25, fiscal year 25. And we know that we need to invest in things like early education, have higher education, fixing some of our infrastructure. We know that we need to keep investing if we want to have a trajectory of growth in the future. So there's a kind of, her words were building a bridge to that future. And I think that's a really smart approach.
When we talked to the governor before she passed the tax cuts, we would ask her, is this to make Massachusetts more affordable for the folks who are already here, or is this to incentivize new folks, new businesses to come to Massachusetts? And she said both, basically. Has she delivered on either of those promises, or is it too early to tell?
Well, I think with all of these things, there's not going to be a silver bullet to any of these, right? And I think when you look at making sure Massachusetts is affordable for lower income folks who live here, we need to make sure that wealthier folks stay here as well, right? Now that we have the millionaires tax in place, it's more important than ever that folks stay here. And so how do we use the tax code in addition to spending in the budget and other policies to kind of combine some different policy maneuvers to keep people here? And so I don't think the tax relief bill was ever meant as kind of a one-stop solution for that. But I do think when you look at the changes, updating the rent deduction for the first time in 20 years, you mentioned the estate tax before, so we moved our threshold up to $2 million. You look at Vermont, you look at Maine, you look at New York, you look at Connecticut. Those are all states with thresholds in the $5 to $12 million range. So just trying to kind of get us in the game with some of the states that just surround us. I think it was a step in the right direction there.
Fitness, do you have an opinion on the estate tax?
I think,
no, he doesn't.
I think the estate tax increase, the cut to the estate taxes was a real mistake. And it was partly a mistake because we shouldn't be focusing on cutting taxes for literally the wealthiest families in Massachusetts, but also the way it was done meant that those folks with bigger estates, bigger than $2 million, actually reaped some of the largest windfall from this. So we can be happy that, the rental deduction got people, for instance, a $50 maximum benefit, but the estate tax cut was a $99,000 benefit. So there's a kind of misalignment between needs and how much resources were expended.
I know we're known as Taxachusetts across the country, but I'm going to ask a dangerous question. Is there any money we're leaving on the table here? Are there any things that we're not taxing that other states are taxing that we should be considering?
I would note in the governor's budget this year, even though there are no new broad-based tax increases, every budget has some additional revenue initiatives, revenue raisers, including about $300 million. There's a tax amnesty program, for example. There are a couple other kind of cleanups to the tax code. And so I do think that policymakers are always looking for places to make sure we're staying current. And the other thing I would note is when you look at the overall revenue trend going back pre-pandemic, we're right on that trend of about 5% revenue growth going back to 2017 or so, which historically speaking is a pretty strong rate of tax revenue growth. So I'm not sure that the lack of revenue growth has really been the challenge. The fact of the matter is we had 3 straight budgets that grew at about 6%, 7%, 8%. That's never going to be sustainable over time. And so I think that's part of the strategy as well.
Phineas, anywhere else where you feel like the state is missing out on a chance to collect and get that revenue up?
Well, I mean, I'll say some of these tax increases are in the context of high inflation. So the value for it, you need to bring in more money just to buy the same value, unfortunately, with inflation. I think in terms of where we might be leaving money on the table, some of that is, and I know we agree on this, is in trying to bring federal grant money in, and there's ways to do that, and the Healy administration is trying to plan that. I think longer term, there's things, one of the things talked about less in this tax change is it used to be that corporations were taxed based a lot on where they had employees and where they had investments. And now it's only on where they're selling into Massachusetts. So the threat that higher taxes on corporations are going to leave them to flee Massachusetts isn't going to matter as long as they can be profitable selling into Massachusetts. That's all that's going to matter from a tax context.
Last thing, have we shed the Taxachusetts label?
Well, one, it kind of rhymes, so I don't think we'll ever quite shed it.
Yes.
Doug Howgate, Phineas Baxendale, thank you so much for joining us. A very interesting conversation, but we're going to keep watching this trend to see if that revenue does pick back up. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Remember, you can always listen to At Issue by listening to the Taking Issue podcast. We post new episodes every single week. week. You can listen on NBC10Boston.com/@issue, or you can stream episodes wherever you get your favorite podcast. That is all the time we have for today, but we are back next Sunday with a look at drugs and safe consumption sites.
With overdose numbers at record highs, there's a growing interest and public support in allowing these centers in the state. One state lawmaker went to several North American cities to see how they work and what happens in neighborhoods where they are set up. Senator John Keenan will join us to talk about what he found.
Thanks again for joining us here on At Issue. I'm Corey Smith.
I'm Sue O'Connell. Have a great day.